Hi, my fellow bookworms. It's Wanda, the Reading Okie who likes to talk. And today I have just one book that I'm going to talk about. And that book is Stoner by John Williams. I don't know if you can see this or not. Got a little bit of reflection going on. Alright, so this book, I was just on YouTube one day and I stumbled across this video, and this had the title, the greatest book you've never heard of. Okay, well, what's this? And so I went in and I looked at it and I'm like, all right. And this booktuber, and honestly I can't remember who it was, so I'm very sorry whoever you are. It's been a while. So I put it on a list, and then I was looking for something to read one day a few weeks back, and I came across it and I was like, I'm going to give that a try. I want to know what the greatest book I've never heard of sounds like when I read it. So I borrowed it from the library and I started reading it. And it was the first 40 to 50 pages. It's a 218 page book, according to my stats. And the first 40 to 50 pages, honestly, I was like, I don't know. And then this book just slammed into me, is the best way I can think of. And I couldn't put it down. I kept thinking about it. I was thinking about it all the time. Open it back up when, and then I'd have to put it down for a minute, or get away from it for a minute, and then open back up. And then when I finished it, I just sat there for a moment, and I was just had tears in my eyes, and it just, this book is about a man named William Stoner. John Williams is the author, and his name is William Stoner, and he's a farm boy in Missouri, grows up on a farm, and he gets a chance to go to the university in Columbia, wherever. Anyway, he gets a chance to go to university, and he goes, and he's going to study agriculture, right? So he can go back and be a better farmer and live back on the farm and help his mom and dad on their farm. Well, something happens to him when he's at the university, and he falls in love with literature. This is what one of his professors tells him. He's like, you've fallen in love. And he just, let me read you a quote. This is from the book. The love of literature, of language, of the mystery of the mind and heart showing themselves in the minute, strange and unexpected combinations of letters and words, in the blackest and coldest print, the love which he had hidden as if it were illicit and dangerous, he began to display, tentatively at first, and then boldly. Because he fell in love with literature, and then he was like, he didn't know what to do with that, because it was so outside his realm of experience. He had no one to guide him through this, and he just fell hard. So he stays at the university. He goes through. He ends up with a PhD, and he gets hired by the university to teach, and he becomes a professor at the university. So basically, in 218 pages, this book, it's about a man goes to university, falls in love with literature, becomes a professor. He gets married. He has a child. Goes through some rough times, has an affair, ends up in a feud with one of his fellow professors, and then he retires. And this is basically the essence. This is what the book is, but it is so gorgeously, wonderfully, fantastically written. This man's life, and of course I kept having George Bailey vibes from it, because he's just like, he's trying to do the right thing. He's just like, and things happen to him, and he's just like, and he just deals with it. He just deals with it, and he plows through it, and he keeps going, and he does the best he can. And it's so good. It's so good. So that's the basic. And if you don't, I'm about to head into spoiler territory, so I'm going to warn you. If you don't want to hear spoilers, if you've never read this book, you might want to go read it, and then you can come back and see if we agree. If that's something you want to do. So okay, spoilers. First, his wife. Oh my word, this woman. I do not know what's wrong with her, because the entire book is told from Stoner's POV. And this woman, I have no idea what is wrong with this woman. She is a sociopath, is the best I can tell. And she agrees to, he courts her just like they would, and he asks her to marry him, and she agrees to marry him. And then it's like she's angry at him for marrying her, for, like he forced her into it or something, and he didn't. And she's horrible. She's just a horrible person. And so a little example of Edith, another quote from the book. With an almost masculine gesture, Edith shook a cigarette from the package beside her plate, stuck it between her lips, and lighted it with the stub of another that she had half finished. She inhaled deeply without taking the cigarette from her lips, and tilted her head back, so that when she looked at William, her eyes were narrowed and quizzical and calculating. Now that just paints a picture of a woman, right? So I'm flashing on all these black and white dames from these black and white movies, right? She's horrible. She gets this bug. She wants to have a baby. So she's like attacking him every day. I want to have a baby. I want to have a baby. So she gets pregnant, and then she's like, boom, that's it. Door slammed shut in his face, right? He's completely cut off at this point. And so she has the baby, and then she doesn't want to have anything to do with the baby. He ends up having to work full time, take care of the baby, take care of the house, cook, clean, everything, changing this baby's diapers. And he's raising this little girl, and her name is Grace. And he's fine with that, because he's like, oh, this is my daughter, I love her. And Edith she just stays in her room all the time, stays in her room, doesn't come out. When she does, she goes to visit her parents in St. Louis, and then when she comes back from St. Louis, she's all 20s flapper lady, right? Because this book takes place, it starts right before World War I, and it ends in the 50s. She comes back, and she's a 20s flapper, right? And she wants to be a socialite, so she goes running around all over the place, having parties, going to parties, still not paying attention to her kid. And Stoner's just doing his thing. He's going to teach, which is what he loves, because he gets to talk about literature, and he gets to share that love of literature with these students. And then he comes home, he writes a book, he takes care of their daughter, and she's out running around doing all kinds of psychotic things. And then it's like she gets bored with that, and then she's like, okay, well, I got to make him miserable. So the first thing she does is, Grace is like about 6 years old now, right? And she decides, oh, okay, well, he's enjoying this baby too much. He's not, this wasn't a punishment to put this baby off on him. So I'm going to take the daughter away. So she's like, Gracie doesn't like hanging out with you like she does. And so she's got to come with me so I can teach her to be a little girl. And Stoner's like, okay, it's whatever you say. And goes along with it. It's like, well, maybe she knows better. She's the mother, right? And so he has his place in the house. She insisted that he buy her this house that he couldn't afford. But he managed to make it work. He, scraped and skinned and got it together. And he had a little study in the house, and that's where he did all his work, to prep for classes. And then she takes the daughter away, and then she's like, well, I need this study. So she starts cringing on his face, and then eventually she takes his study away. He's trying to write this book. She destroys all his papers that he's done so far, all the work he's done so far on his book, and she's destroying his little library that he has. And so he's like, okay, fine. So he packs up everything, and he finds a space at the university to take all his stuff to, so that he can work there. But it's too small and it's too crowded, and he really can't work there. He can't focus, right? Because he's having to share the space with like 4 or 5 other professors. And so she's just like running him out. and so he's, so he's just struggling. He's like, I don't understand what's going on. And she's doing her sociopath thing, and he goes along, and then this new professor comes to the university, and this new professor has this young man that he's kind of mentoring, and that young man takes one of Stoner's classes, and Stoner fails him because he's incompetent and he's stupid, and so this begins this lifelong feud between this professor and Stoner, because that professor just like, you just did this on purpose and failed my student because you knew, and Stoner's like, no, he's incompetent. And so this begins a fight, and that professor gets put into a position of charge, and so he's making Stoner's life miserable at the university, right? So Edith did this weird turn on him and run him out of his home, basically. So he had no place to go. He didn't have a home to go to. And then this professor at the university, gets this enmity with him and turns on him, and now he's trying to make him as uncomfortable as possible, trying to run him out of the university. But Stoner hangs in there and is like, no, this he drew a line there. He was like, I'm not. I mean, he let Edith just run rampant all over him, and he drew the line with this professor. He was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. This is where I'm staying. And then he meets this young instructor, this woman, and they have an affair, and he's happy for like a year. And then that professor gets wind of it and blackmails them and says, I'm going to destroy her career and anything and everything she could possibly hope to have. If you can either have her, but you'll have to quit the university. If you want her, you're going to have to quit the university. Otherwise, this I'm going to report you, and you're going to, lose everything, and she'll lose everything. And so to protect her, he gave her up, and she left, and she goes, and moves off, and so, this love of his life, this person he had this great meeting of the minds with, and so after this, he's angry and he's bitter, and he just rocks along, and he just don't even care anymore, right? And that professor tries to do stuff to him, and he's like, no, this is I'm not gonna, do what you want, whatever, the worst has happened, right? He doesn't have his wife because she's hateful to him. She's still being hateful. He doesn't have his daughter because his wife took his daughter away from him. He doesn't have his the love of his life because this professor took the love of his life away from him. And he's just angry. And then it's time for him to retire, and they're going to force him to retire. And he's like, no, I don't want to retire. And I mean, this is in the 50s, and he's like 60 years old, and they're like, no, you got to retire. And because he had been a tenured professor, and apparently they're only allowed to stay for so long. And then when he goes, he was going to not retire, he was going to fight it, and because apparently there's some kind of extension thing where he could go another couple of years teaching, and so he was going to just like max it out, just go as long as he could. And then he finds out he has cancer, and so then begins his decline, and it happens fairly quickly because, of course, like many men, he waited and waited and waited to go to the doctor, and so by the time he found out he had cancer, there wasn't a whole lot they could do about it. It was all over him. So he makes peace with Edith because he's a good guy, and he makes peace with this professor because, again, he's a good guy, and then he's just waiting it out, and it's the end of his life, and he's having all these thoughts and all these things, and I'm just going to read the end of it. Like I said, this big time spoiler territory. So he's at the very end, and he's laying, he can't move, he can't do anything, he's kind of going in and out of consciousness. He's not really sure which way's up, which way's down, and he's just thinking about different things. And so I'll start here. What did you expect? He thought again. A kind of joy came upon him, as if borne in on a summer breeze. He dimly recalled that he had been thinking of failure, as if it mattered. It seemed to him now that such thoughts were mean, unworthy of what his life had been. Dim presences gathered at the edge of his consciousness. He could not see them, but he knew that they were there, gathering their forces toward a kind of palpability He could not see or hear. He was approaching them, he knew, but there was no need to hurry. He could ignore them if he wished. He had all the time there was. There was a softness around him, and a languor crept upon his limbs. A sense of his own identity came upon him with a sudden force, and he felt the power of it. He was himself, and he knew what he had been. His head turned. His bedside table was piled with books that he had not touched for a long time. He let his hand play over them for a moment. He marveled at the thinness of the fingers, at the intricate articulation of the joints as he flexed them. He felt the strength within them and let them pull a book from the jumble on the tabletop. It was his own book that he had sought, and when the hand held it, he smiled at the familiar red cover that had for a long time been faded and scuffed. It hardly mattered to him that the book was forgotten and that it served no use, and the question of its worth at any time seemed almost trivial. He did not have the illusion that he would find himself there in that fading print, and yet he knew, a small part of him that he could not deny was there and would be there. He opened the book, and as he did so, it became not his own. He let his fingers rifle through the pages and felt a tingling as if those pages were alive. The tingling came through his fingers and coursed through his flesh and bone. He was minutely aware of it, and he waited until it contained him, until the old excitement that was like terror fixed him where he lay. The sunlight, passing his window, shone upon the page, and he could not see what was written there. The fingers loosened, and the book they had held moved slowly and then swiftly across the still body and fell into the silence of the room. And Stoner was gone. He was at peace at last. It's so beautiful. If you have not read this book, read it. Which, I just told you how it ended. It's just so gorgeous. It is gorgeous. I'll never forget this book. I never will. And I will be asking anybody and everybody, look, you should read this book. If you love the written word, you should read this book. It is absolutely gorgeous. All right, that's it for me this week. You guys have a great weekend.